9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
For decades, access to space has depended on a surprisingly small number of launch sites, a handful of coastlines, a few carefully controlled corridors to orbit, and an increasingly crowded queue. But now Türkiye is making a bold move, one that could redraw the global launch map. The country has begun construction of a space launch facility in Somalia, a project officials say could give Türkiye a lasting foothold in the rapidly expanding global space industry. And for Somalia, it represents a rare opportunity to become part of humanity's journey beyond Earth. I'm Afzal Ahmed and this is Aloud. This show brings you articles made for audio. In this episode, we've adapted the piece Somalia Spaceport to give Türkiye a foothold in global launch industry by Esra Karataş Alpay, published on TRT World on January the 6th, 2026. The confirmation came from Industry and Technology Minister Mehmet Fatih Kajer, who announced that feasibility and design studies are complete and that the first phase of construction is now underway. The site sits on land allocated to Türkiye under a bilateral agreement with Somalia, and the effort is being coordinated by the Ministry of Industry and Technology, the Turkish Space Agency, and other national institutions. The project was first revealed publicly at the end of 2025 when President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud in Istanbul. Türkiye, he said, intends to establish a launch complex along the Horn of Africa coastline, and the timing is no coincidence. The global space economy is growing fast. It was valued at around $600 billion in 2024 and is projected to approach $1.8 trillion by the mid-2030s. One of the fastest growing segments is launch services, as governments and private companies race to deploy satellites for communications, navigation, defense, and Earth observation. But while demand has surged, launch infrastructure has not kept pace. Today, much of the world's launch capacity is concentrated in just a few locations. SpaceX alone conducts nearly 200 launches a year, mainly from Cape Canaveral in Florida and Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Experts say that concentration creates a structural bottleneck. Professor Arif Karabeyoğlu, a board member of the Turkish Space Agency, puts it plainly. If SpaceX had access to more launch locations, he says, it could likely conduct 300 launches a year. The problem isn't rockets, it's geography. That's where Somalia comes in. Launch sites near the equator offer a major advantage. The Earth's rotation provides extra speed, reducing fuel requirements and increasing payload efficiency. Somalia lies just 2 degrees north of the equator, even closer than Europe's main launch site in Kourou in French Guiana. Karabeyoğlu calls Somalia one of the best places in the world for space launches. Open ocean flight paths, low air and maritime traffic, stable weather, minimal disaster risk. All of it reduces cost and risk. For Türkiye, the implications are strategic. Until now, Ankara has relied on foreign launch providers competing for limited slots on someone else's schedule. That began to change in 2024. That year, Türkiye sent its first astronaut, Colonel Alper Gezerabci, to the International Space Station. It also launched Turksat 6A, its first domestically produced communications satellite, aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Important milestones, but still dependent. Space and defense policy expert Nazmeli Zengin says the Somalia spaceport marks a decisive transition from space user to launch actor. With its own equatorial launch facility, Türkiye would be able to place nationally developed satellites into orbit using nationally developed launchers on its own schedule and under its own terms. That autonomy matters. It strengthens national security, improves strategic resilience, and positions Türkiye as a potential launch provider for Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. As Nazmel Zengin puts it, Türkiye is no longer just buying tickets to space, it's beginning to operate the shuttles. Over time, those services are expected to generate sustainable commercial revenue for Türkiye. For Somalia, the project carries a different kind of promise. Beyond lease revenue or prestige, the spaceport could anchor technical education programs, create skilled employment, and connect the country to one of the world's highest value industries. Turkish investment brings not just capital, but engineering expertise, training pathways, and long-term industrial links, from satellite services to communications and data infrastructure. Professor Karabeyoğlu calls it a transformative opportunity. In the end, this is more than a construction project. It's a vision on shared futures, on turning a geopolitical partnership into technological progress, on opening new routes, not just to orbit, but to development. For Türkiye, the Somalia spaceport is an investment in strategic autonomy, joining an elite number of nations. For Somalia, it could be a gateway into the space age. That's all for this episode of Aloud, based on the piece Somalia Spaceport to Give Türkiye a Foothold in Global Launch Industry by Esra Karataş Alpay, published on TRT World on January the 6th, 2026. I'm your host Afzal Ahmed. Thanks for listening.